Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm so glad that you've decided to tune in for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And this week, I have Nicole Greer on with me as my very fabulous guest this week. And yeah, I know, right? Wait until you hear your bio back. It's always fun to hear what someone is reading about us, right? So as a principal coach and CEO of Build a Vibrant Culture, Nicole Greer helps individuals, corporations, government, faith-based organizations, and nonprofits become the people they were created to be through fulfilling a mission to work in teams and exemplify vibrant leadership. Using transformational change leadership coaching and training programs, Nicole offers foundational tools and uncommon wisdom to build a vibrant culture. Nicole is a serious entrepreneur with experience in coaching, marketing, mastering first impressions, learning and development, and sales. Nicole is a speaker, trainer, facilitator, executive, and business coach, and you can learn all the things about her and connect with her through the show notes that you can find if you're watching or listening to this episode. So Nicole, thank you so much for joining the podcast this week.
Oh my gosh, Tracy, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we have quite the range of topics, but really primarily focused on the employee-manager relationship and some performance management elements too, as it relates to being a manager or being an employee. So why don't we start first and foremost by kind of setting the stage, tell the listeners a little bit more about what it means to build a vibrant culture, where this comes from, and why it's really become, a passion of yours. Obviously, you're the CEO and founder.
Yeah, so here's what I think about culture. A lot of people have an approach towards culture as like, let's work on the culture. And there are things that you can do, strategies that you can put in place to build a vibrant culture. But I think at the heart of a vibrant culture is the manager-employee relationship. So you and I have been hanging out in the HR circles for our whole career, and we know that the number one reason that people quit a company is because of their manager. So it's really about that manager having the ability to have a wonderful relationship with their employee. And what I think a wonderful relationship involves is the growth and development of that employee. If I think back in my career, the managers and the leaders that I worked for that like kind of took, that old saying, take you under your wing, and they help you learn the ropes, and they put skills in your toolbox, and they sign you up for training, and they challenge you with projects. You feel loved and cared for. And when people are loved and cared for, they get all warm and happy. And that's why people become vibrant. They're like, I love working here. And so I think really at the crux of a vibrant culture is great manager-employee relations.
I totally agree. And, sometimes what I hear, I'm sure you've heard this too, with either those you coach or even customers or clients that you've had through your trainings and workshops, is this idea that culture is top down. And I think I can't exactly recall that we might have spoken about my philosophy on this, that culture is 360 and that everyone has an impact on the culture. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that it can be top down, and like I'm saying, you can have certain strategies in place. So, for example,
Right.
this is a very common strategy, but I'm not sure many organizations do it well. Okay. And that is the strategy of having a vision. So I go to lots of companies and I'm like, what's your vision? And they will say something like this: to give the most incredible service to our customers. And I'm like, that's not a vision. That might be a mission statement, but it is not a vision. So a vision is an actual point on the calendar in the future, and we pick a date and we say, this is how we're going to be doing, and this is what our company is about at that date in the future. So I can give a quick example if you'd like me to.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked for a company called Summit for many, many years, 14 years. And my president of the company, his name was John Gray. And John was very versed at this. In fact, he was the first leader I ever worked for that had this clear picture of like, you've got to have a vision with a date. Because, see, here's the thing, people want to win. And so if you set a goal and you hit it, the whole company's like, we're awesome. And
We
we get
won.
excited and
Right.
enthusiastic about it. And so one of the things that we did is I in the company I worked for was property management. And so there's an organization called the National Apartment Association. And they had a process where you could be ranked against other property management firms to be the number one apartment management company in America. And so John's like, we're
Mm.
going to win it. That's what we're going to do. And we were all like, all right. And so he said, that's what we're going to do. Now, don't miss this. In 1 year, we're going to win this award and we're going to be number one. And so it's just kind of like wanting to play football and be in the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. That was kind of the thing. Well, we had strategies to get us there. And so those things were superior customer service, excellence in product quality. And so we had KPIs around all that. So everybody knew whether you were hitting it or you weren't hitting it. And so it was very clear. So expectations were laid out for us like, if this is how we'll win, and this is how your property will help us win. And so it was easy to get after the things that were going to make us awesome, make us win this award. And so, you know what? By God, we won it like 3 years in a row. and
Wow.
and
That's
it was a
amazing.
fantastic company to work for. We all loved it.
Wow, that's I'm reflecting on what you've said here around really picking a date on the calendar and going after whatever that vision is, whether it's you know retaining your team at a certain percentage by that point in time, or as you've shared with John and the team that you worked on. And it's interesting because if I reflect on some experiences that I've had where maybe vision was more apparent, I think there is this sense of a time bound measurement related to what that vision is. So I really appreciate that you're giving that type of like tactical knowledge around this, because it's really easy, I think, for leaders, managers, however we want to reference people, managers and leaders, and especially HR professionals, to get lost in the sauce, as I like to say, and kind of
Uh-huh.
like forget what the goal is. Like, what is this greater vision?
Hmm.
And if we can have if we have that vision and we throw a dart on the map, and like that's, or on the calendar in this case, and we're saying, okay, by January 2025, we are going to be a company that is considered the best place for people to work. And that means that we have a 50
There's a good
for an
goal.
ENPS score, right? Amazing goal. Then
Hmm.
it's like, okay, how do you get there? And how do you take all of your values and all of your initiatives and all of your KPIs to drive toward that? Because actually, in reflecting on your point, when you don't have a vision, what are you actually working toward? Like you
You're
could
just
work
getting through each
toward.
day.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You could execute on the mission. You can execute on your KPIs because you have a bonus tied to them. But are you working toward that greater goal if you don't have this wider vision? So I really appreciate that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and as you were, kind of sharing what you're saying is, there's another company. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this little company, but it's called PALS, PAL apostrophe S, and it is a fast food chain that's like in Tennessee. And it is the cutest little place. Everybody Google Pals, and there's be this little blue building with a giant hot dog on the front of it. I mean, giant hot dog and a Coke. Okay, and they have a little thing called sudden service. It's one of their mission things and their core values to give sudden service. So literally, you drive through the drive-through, but there's no speaker. You talk directly to a human. By the time you drive around to the other side of the building, your hot dog's hanging out the window. I mean, like, it's that fast.
That is
So
sudden.
that is sudden. Well, that company, they decided that they were going to cast a vision to win the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which is a huge undertaking. And so Google that later just for fun. And so they got after it. And what happens when you go after the Malcolm Baldrige Award is you get your processes, your systems, and your plan like nailed down. It's a wonderful thing to do. Well, and they won the Malcolm Baldrige Award. So this little teeny tiny
Wow.
fast food joint that makes hot dogs wins this giant award. Okay, which how
Wow.
fun is that? So byproduct of that is that everybody all of a sudden is like, well, what are you guys doing? And so all the little companies that are in food service, they called up PALS. How do you do it? PALS started a whole second company that trains other companies how to run
Wow.
their businesses. So, like, just think of the growth that happened inside of PALS. We're running hot dog stores, but now we have a training. We have a whole training
Yeah.
business.
They're
And
also a
so
learning and development organization.
right, right. And so that made everybody very vibrant and excited and enthusiastic to work there because they won and then they grew. And here's what I imagine. I don't know this for a fact, but probably a manager ended up going over to the new business and is now training people. And he or she
Mhm.
never
Mhm.
saw that opportunity coming.
Totally. That's amazing. And I did look it up for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, do you see? Oh,
That
and
is
a giant
definitely a
hamburger on that one.
gigantic, yes. Those are gigantic. Those really are. This is not what I thought. And a gigantic fountain drink and fries.
Yep, yep.
That's pretty cool. Did they, just out of curiosity, did they name their training company Pals Pals?
Oh, I
Because
don't know
that would
the
be
ends.
good.
I don't know. I think it's just their subsidiary, but we should
Just
look
right,
that
right,
up.
right.
Yeah, we should look that
I
up.
think that would be kind of cool. But when you do Google it, it says Pals Sudden Service. That's really, really cool. And
Mhm.
I mean, I think what's really interesting about what you've shared is that you don't, this is not like a huge, gigantic business that's making waves in society or in the global community. This is a teeny tiny, locally based, not teeny tiny, but a locally based company, because I don't know what their revenue is to say it's teeny tiny, but a small local business that has impacted not only the people that work for them pretty significantly and dramatically, they've also now impacted other people's businesses and therefore their employees. And so when we think about that, this is probably a great segue actually. When we think about the relationship between manager and employee, and actually, I just had a guest on who I don't know if her episode will be before yours or after, so we'll see. But Kamaria Scott was one of my guests, and she talks about change management. And one of the things that we did touch on is that manager is sometimes seen as like a dirty word, and that people often prefer leader because they attribute manager to things like micromanagement, like bad cultures, right? Poor experiences. But really, that's just a reflection of a lack of skill set, a lack of potentially competency. So when we think about the relationship, coming back to you here, what do you think is like the most important, or maybe the few most important things that get the relationship off to a good start so that there is potential for the manager and the employee's relationship to really have a strong foundation?
Okay, that's a great question. And so here's the first thing. Oftentimes we promote people who are good technicians into a manager role and say they're really good at their job. Let's make them a manager, which is a
Mm,
completely different skill set. I'm not saying that person can't be the manager, but I am saying you need to put them in a first time manager class, program, get them a mentor, something so that they learn that second skill set besides whatever they're technically proficient at. And then, you said manager is a bad word. So the second thing I would say about this human that's coming into this position is that there are four hats that everybody who has direct reports, so that's how I'm saying it. Anyone who has direct reports, you have four hats you wear. One is your leadership hat, one is your manager hat, one is your mentoring hat, and one is your coaching hat. So, with your
mm,
permission, I'd like to tease those four hats
please.
out, what they
Yeah.
are. Okay.
Yeah.
So the leader, the word lead, it tells you that like I'm going to take my employee by the hand and I'm like, "Come on, follow me. We're going to the future." So leading is future oriented. So, I was saying that one of the cultural things that you can do is get a really good vision. Well, then the person with direct reports is able to
Hmm.
take the top leader the CEO take their vision and bring it down to size for your department or area. Our part of getting to this big thing is this. And so, again, it's taking you by the hand and casting a vision. Our department needs to morph, change, develop, increase, decrease, whatever the stuff is to get to this new place. And so it's about change. It's about driving performance. It's about inspiring, because the future is it's PFA, pulled from air. Okay, we're making it up. Okay, a vision is made
Totally
up in
true.
your mind, and you have to be okay with that. But then you have to tell an inspiring story. So maybe you were inspired by Pal's story just a minute ago, or you were inspired by my story at Summit where we won the National Apartment Association thing. Leaders have to be able to tell stories so people can see. Story is our first language. And then I have to be able to influence, meaning I have to be able to say to you, here's your part in it. Here's how you're going to operate in the future so you can get where you want to go. All right, so that's leading. So it's big picture and it's full of hope and energy and enthusiasm. Now, managing is not quite as sexy. Managing is where we're like, what do we got to get done today? And it's about process, and it's about procedure, and it's about meeting KPIs. It's about controlling things, not being a control freak, but managers control things. So for example, we're making widgets and the orders for the widgets stop coming in. The manager goes, stop making widgets. We don't have enough orders. So they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at the levers. And sometimes managers have to exert power or authority over people because they're not doing well. So it's kind of like, Tracy's not doing well, which would never happen ever on earth. But I pull her in my office and I say, hey, this is where we need to be. Here's where you're at. Here's the gap. Let me help you figure out what to do in this gap. So now I'm taking control of the situation to help you, not to be a micromanager. So that's managing. So leading is big and bright and woo, and managing is like, this widget right here is not good. How do we fix it and make it good? So it's kind of a scope thing.
Different.
Yeah. And so then here's the other two hats, mentoring and coaching. So when you work with an employee, sometimes they don't know anything that, like they don't know what you know. And I often find too,
Right.
Tracy, some managers or leaders or people who have direct reports are frustrated. They're like, he should know. He should know. She should know. And it's like, well, no, they don't know.
Well,
They've never
actually, how
done
do
this
you know
before.
that they should know? Right.
Right. So that's where you would say, hey, come here, Tracy, sit down. Let me tell you what I know. Here's how I've done it.
Knowledge
Like,
share.
yeah, and imparting skills and giving advice and giving them training. And that is helping the employee connect the dots. When people say, what does a mentor do? I say, connect the dots in the employee's mind. This dot gets you to that dot. Here's the gap. I'm giving you all the stuff you need to know to navigate this gap so that you can connect the dots. But then once you get an employee in your organization that you are responsible for on the org chart, and they're doing pretty good, you want to start challenging them to connect their own dots. And that's called coaching. And that's where we ask powerful questions and we inquire and we probe and we challenge. And we're helping to facilitate that employee's ability to be a figure outer.
Throughout my experience in HR, I've come to a profound realization. Certain tools can truly be a game changer. That's why I'm excited to talk about Cocoon, the leave management software that's making waves in the industry. I've heard wonderful things about how Cocoon not only simplifies the entire leave process, but also keeps administrative costs low. Their automation handles the most complex parts of leave, from compliance and claims to payroll, saving your team countless hours and headaches about leave. Clients and their finance teams rave about the cost savings they've seen by taking advantage of state and disability benefits for their employees. Plus, Cocoon integrates seamlessly with top HRIS systems like Workday and ADP, ensuring a smooth process from start to finish. Head to cocoon.com/HR and see the value for you and your employees. New customers who mention my podcast are eligible for a 50% implementation fee discount. Again, that's cocoon.com/HR, COCOON.com/HR. Now let's get back to the podcast. I love that. I think it definitely underpins this idea that everyone can lead, whether they have direct reports or not. I like that you use that as the signal for us, and that managers are really responsible for all of these four hats, wearing all four of these hats, and also that they have to be able to be agile and they have to be able to move
Yes.
through those hats and figure out which hat do they need to wear. And more often than not, I think, and you tell me if you agree, disagree, you are totally entitled to disagree on my podcast. I think that people who have direct reports more often than not do the managing, and then maybe some of the leading, depending on maybe how influential or how inspiring or how motivational that they are, or even how much exposure they've had to leading. And I think the mentoring and the coaching often fall a little flat, especially for newer managers or newer people leaders who have not had the exposure to mentoring and coaching or have not had the training that they've needed.
Mm.
Because again, and I always like to say in my practice in a director or business partner type of function within HR is that even if someone had, let's say maybe they'd come from a massive organization, like let's say Google, and we can assume that they had probably some of the best training or learning and development that companies can offer. One cannot assume that they've actually been trained or that they actually have that knowledge or that they have that awareness. And I always like to say that with that understanding, that when someone joins an organization, we have to assume that they know nothing. We have to assume that they maybe have some, and that's not from a place of condescension. It's really just very direct, that it's like, okay, we should assume that they, for example, they have never had the exposure or the opportunity to manage someone's performance or write a performance review or write a performance improvement plan or corrective action or coach someone or whatever that might be. And with that understanding or looking through that lens, then you afford everyone the opportunity to learn rather than kind of just throwing them to the wolves to figure it out. And then you end up potentially dressing them down in the event that they did something wrong. But this all kind of boils down to the assumption that's made that someone might know how to do something. So, long-winded answer or long-winded explanation for this idea that I have, that most people leaders are not leaning into the mentoring and coaching potentially because they've not had that themselves.
Well, absolutely. You can't replicate what you have never experienced.
Right.
Because you do have a blind spot around mentoring or coaching, and so leaders do need those skill sets. And one of the programs that I teach quite a bit, which is kind of a weird program, is
Mhm.
asking powerful questions. I actually just taught it on Monday to a bunch of financial people, and I was
Mm.
so delighted. I had a nice little turnout for this program, and the thing is we don't ask questions to help the other person connect their dots. We ask questions to get a detail that gets
Yes.
me the information I need so I can connect a dot. But see,
Yes.
great managers, leaders, people with direct reports want to teach and empower their people to be dot connectors, figure outers, because that alleviates a lot of pressure off of you. If you've got a line of people outside your door waiting to get you to answer their questions, you've got a problem.
Mhm.
You've got to
Yes.
empower them to ask the questions themselves, right? And to be that
Yes.
person that can connect those dots. And this is all very close to like how your brain works. So there's a video that I love, and I tell everybody to watch this thing. It's by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it is his TEDx talk from Tacoma, Washington. So I double dog everybody listening to go watch this thing. It is so fantastic. But he talks about the brain and how it works. And the more people have to think about their work instead of this, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, I don't even know why I'm doing it, but just, I'll be your minion or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
Um, the brain does not grow a strong neural network around that activity because you've given a direction and then they're back in your office. What next? And then they're back in your office.
Mhm.
What next? But if you ask powerful questions around whatever the activity is, coaching, then that employee starts to get a neural network. They're connecting dots. And like when we say connecting dots, literally you have these neurons with ganglia hanging off of them. That's what Dr. Dispenza talks about. And they link up. And so you begin
Mhm.
to really understand the work. And you know what we call that when you really understand your work? Expertise.
Mm. What a fabulous word, too. Everyone
Yeah,
wants to have expertise in something, right?
that's right. So you got to make your people smarter.
Yes, yes. And I like this a lot because first of all, it takes me back a little bit, and I'll share an anecdotal story briefly. But the first thing is that always much easier and much faster to just give someone an answer. But when you
Hmm.
actually enable people via their own skills and their own ability to think through challenges or problems, and therein enabling them to solve problems or to be inquisitive or to try and be resourceful so they go and seek out the answer for themselves, you actually end up making it much easier for you in the middle to long run because it's more work up front, but then they can fish for themselves. There's that
100%. I love
proverb,
that.
right? There's that age old proverb that says
Well, give a man a fish, he
okay,
eats for a day.
yes.
Teach a man to fish, he eats for life. That's
Exactly.
how
Give
I
a
know
man
it.
a Yes. So the age-old proverb goes, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Right.
Exactly. So that I always come back to that proverb because it's so easily understood that yeah, you just give the person a fish, fine, you've solved that problem in that moment,
Mhm.
but they're going to keep coming back looking for the fish, just like you mentioned before. But when you actually give someone the tools, so in this case you teach someone to fish, then they don't have to come back to you. They're now fishing for themselves, and maybe there's a path down the road where they come across a new challenge and they come back to you and they seek additional support. But it's really that enablement piece. I think that's so important. And the anecdotal story that I want to share is that when I worked in Target in HR in store for almost 4 years, and this was the start of my career. It's where I sharpened my HR knives, as I like to say.
Mhm.
There was an like I would say a significant emphasis placed on quote unquote coaching questions and coaching
Right.
conversations.
Perfect.
And this was really effectively what you're saying, Nicole, which is ask ask powerful questions, ask questions that encourage someone to think and empower them to answer their own questions, and that then further enable them to attempt to solve the problem or seek out an answer with their own resources that they have. So I remember when I was, you're a sponge at the beginning of your career, you should continue
Mhm.
to be a sponge, but obviously that's when we're the spongiest. And I remember I had started out and I had a team of like 5 or 8 people, and I was like, why do I have so many people reporting into me? I just graduated college, but okay, here we go. And I
Game on.
I remember I had to like really practice so much these coaching conversations. And inevitably, what happens is you really do see people's wheels start to turn, and you see them almost appreciate you as their manager a little bit more, because no one wants to, like, fundamentally, no one wants to be told what to do or how to think or what an answer is. Most of the time people ask those questions because either they are not taking the time to be curious enough for themselves, and or they are not in the habit of trying to solve or answer their own questions. So it is something that takes practice, but it's so important. So I really appreciate that you've brought up this what you do around powerful questions, because it's so impactful for both parties.
Oh, 100%. And the thing is, a powerful question is very simple. It's not some magical thing. So a powerful question is an open-ended question. So anybody on this call that's like, "Well, I've had sales training. I've heard that before." Open-ended question. It is essentially being able to ask a question that cannot be answered by yes or no,
Mm-hmm.
because we want the other person to have to, again, put these, get their ganglia connected around, a neural network around whatever it is you're asking them about. And you ask an open-ended question, and if they don't know the answer, it's powerful, because
Mm-hmm.
now they're going to have to formulate something, so their brain goes to work. But I can give you an example. So if I said, "Tracy, do you love what you do?"
Yes.
Okay. Did I get very much information out of her? No, but I could say, "What is it about doing HR that you love?" Now, she might talk for 3 days about that because she
Mm-hmm.
loves
Mm-hmm.
HR so stinking much. But, that's what we want people to do. So, one of the things that, I would work in these apartment communities and these restaurants. That was what I did before I started my own company. And I would had one regional manager, Nancy Freeman. She was so amazing. And she came to the property and we walked the property, and she would stop and she would see something. And she'd say, "What do you think we should do right here?" And I'm
Mm.
like, clean it up, cut the bushes back. They're hanging out in the street. People's cars are running into them. Like, she didn't say, "Write this down, cut the bushes back, clean it up." She made me think for myself about what would make this part of the property look nicer, and be better for the customer, for the people who lived in my apartments, the residents. And so she made me think for myself. And
Mm.
here's the thing, I was so stinking lucky I had her,
Yeah.
because then when I became a regional, I would go with my manager. I said, "Let's go take a walk around. Let's go get on the golf cart and drive around the apartments. What are you seeing? What could we do right here that would make it better?" And they would tell me. And then it wasn't like I was bossing them around. It was like I was
Right.
just helping.
Right.
I'd say, "Do you need a resource for that?" I got a good tree guy. Trees are a big problem in apartment communities, by the way. So I was
Yeah.
like, "I got a good tree guy. You want his number?" "Yeah, let me call him." So, it was like a collaboration. And I think that's a big, important thing between people with direct reports, or managers and employees, is that we need to be collaborative. And I think when you kind of slow down too, because you have to go slower to ask the questions.
Yes. Yes.
Because I can go, "Fix this, do this, do this, do this," and that's really fast. But slower is, "What do you think we should do?
Mm-hmm.
What is your
Mm-hmm.
next right step?
Right.
If you had all the money to fix this, what would be the thing that you would do?" "Okay, well, now that you only have
My,
$2,000 to fix it, what will you do?"
right,
you
right,
know,
right.
but you're going to
Let's
have to
keep
be
solving this
slower.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah. My boss always says move slowly, move more slowly to move faster. And it's,
100%.
it really is this notion of like, let's get it, let's put in the work now so that later on our efforts maybe are a little bit less grueling, potentially, depending on what it is that the sub or whatever subject it is. And to your point, what your regional did with you at that time, which really is obviously a fundamental learning, and it sounds like that company had some amazing leadership, and we should see what they're doing now and try and recruit them for our own companies. But I digress. What that did is enable you to have your own mind. And to your point, as you mentioned before, you weren't getting bossed around, which really, like, when we come back to this relationship building piece, every conversation can build a relationship or break down a relationship.
Amen.
And even if you're, thank you. And even if you're in this moment of assessing a potential problem and you're looking for the solution and you're collaborating on that solution, that is an opportunity to build a relationship, because at the end of the day, employees want to feel a part of the solution. They want to belong. They want to feel part of a team. And that's not reflected when there's this top-down or hierarchical approach to solving problems. It is this collaboration, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And there is a time for hierarchical. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
Just when we started this podcast, I was at a building where the fire alarm went off. And somebody was telling everybody, get out of the building, go to that place, stand right there, do not move. And we all did.
Yeah, we need that. Yeah, that we need.
So it just depends on the scenario.
Right. It's so true. I love that you brought that perspective, and I really appreciate that you've joined the podcast this week to really inspire, hopefully, our listeners and provide a lot of insight into how we can take every interaction and make it positive, make it constructive, and enable the people that we're connecting with. Even if they're not our direct reports, we can have these types of conversations with our
100%.
colleagues, our peers, our bosses, right? Like, that's amazing. So Nicole, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'd love for you to share where everyone can connect with you and learn more about building a vibrant culture. And everything will be linked in the show notes, of course.
Yeah. So it's real simple. Go to www.vibrantculture.com and there I'll be. I'm also on the LinkedIn and the Facebook and the Instagram and all the places. And so if you just put in Vibrant Culture, I pop up.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate, again, all of your insights.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.